Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Your Life Simplified. My name is Jack Giardino, and I'll be the host for this episode. On today's topic of discussion, we're going to be kind of taking a different point of view from the community involvement and charitable involvement side of things. Usually when we have these kinds of conversations, we're really focusing on the tax picture and how can we maybe give back to our community or donate to charities that we have a strong belief in and do that in a tax efficient manner. However, for today's conversation, we've brought on a guest to kind of talk about more of the time involvement and how can you become more involved in your community and give back with time instead of funds. So for today's episode, we have brought on Katie Dunn Fitzgerald, who's a principal and senior wealth consultant here at Mariner Wealth Advisors. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you on. I know we've worked kind of hand in hand in the past, and I know you relatively well, but you're extremely involved in the community. So would you mind just kind of starting off today's conversation with how did you become involved in the community and why is it something that you're so passionate about?
You know, I thought about this. I have been involved in the community since I was a young child. It was ingrained in our family culture. It was part of my background in the schools that I went to. I grew up going to both a Catholic grade school and high school, and part of the requirements of growing up were that you had to give back and be involved in the community. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I've been doing since I was a little girl, and it's carried over into adulthood, and I just enjoy being involved and giving back my time.
And that's great to hear. I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later in today's episode. But, you know, part of the community involvement is instilling those great practices and beliefs within your children or the next generation. And I've discussed this a little bit on previous episodes of the podcast, but where would you recommend or how do you recommend our listeners to get involved within their community?
I would start by saying, think about what you already enjoy doing. When I graduated from college, I had somebody reach out to me who asked me if I was still playing soccer actively. I was pretty involved in soccer throughout high school, grade school, and so forth, and played recreationally in college. And when this individual reached out to me, he said he had a sixth grade daughter who needed a coach. He felt like he had grown out of that role and was looking for a young woman to mentor and be a leader for his daughter's soccer team. So I found two other girls that I enjoyed playing with, and that was where we started. I was 22 years old, and I started coaching these sixth grade girls, and it was fun. And it just became something that was part of my culture and my after work life. And I think that that's then carried over into numerous other activities that I've gotten involved with since.
It sounds like part of that was just from a connection that you previously had, right? So that individual knew that you played soccer and then ultimately, you know, brought that opportunity to you. When I think of networking and getting involved in your community, so to speak, I really think that networking piece is extremely important. If you don't have these connections or maybe you move to a different location, how would you guide or recommend an individual start that networking process or just get to know your neighbors or start building that connection of their own?
So there were two key things that I did early in my career to help me get involved in the community as well as network. And first was from a female perspective, I joined the Junior League. And the Junior League is a great organization for young women who are looking to grow their business skills as well as get involved in the community and give back. There is some requirements that you have to volunteer a certain number of hours, and they have organized events, so it makes it really easy. But then there's also a leadership component that's involved with that as well. So you learn how to take those leadership skills that you are learning when you're giving back and volunteering at an organization, and then bring that back into your business environment. In addition to that, I would say that I also got involved giving back to the United Way, and they have what's called a Young Leader Society. And I joined United Way Young Leader Society and started participating in that shortly after starting my career. And when I was with the United Way volunteering, I asked, how do I get a leadership role? Mm-hmm. And they said, you join our steering committee. And I said, well, what do I need to do that? And they told me what the process was. And then I was on the steering committee. And then that evolved over time to then taking the next step up in the United Way and then joining some boards and things like that. So I think Most major cities do have local United Way chapter. And so that's a great starting point in getting involved in the nonprofit community.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great recommendation. And United Way, it's a wonderful organization. And whether it be Junior League or United Way or, any other organization, I think one difficult part about getting involved or starting to get your feet wet is you learn about these organizations from a high level and you don't really know what they do or what they stand for. What would my role actively be? It sounds like you have some experience within figuring out, hey, does this organization or this involvement that I'm going to volunteer my time for, does it really align with my beliefs and my values? How do you go about maybe, penetrating those organizations and learning more about them from a deeper level to figure out if it is a right fit for you or not?
So there are some organizations that will take a deep dive with you. The Greater Kansas City Community Foundation, which has a broad chapter called New Horizons, and they will work with you to help take you through a process to figure out what it is that drives your passion and giving back. That's one way to go about it. Another is just sitting down with your friends and your peers or even your significant other and asking them, where do you guys as a family, friends, couple want to give back your time and your money? Because obviously a lot of these organizations, they want your time and they want you to volunteer, but they also want your financial support. Mm-hmm. And so you have to think, where are the places that I believe that I think they're going to use my money wisely? And so go ask them if you can take a tour, meet with people that are involved at those organizations and get to know how they're spending those dollars. If they're not spending those dollars wisely, then that might not be an organization that you want to be a part of. And so if you're super involved with children's organizations, there's resources out there that I've used through the Community Foundation that have helped me identify what are some local children's charities that I could get more involved with.
And I think that's wonderful insight. I think, from my own personal experiences, and maybe you can dive on this or touch on this a little bit deeper, but whether you're with that organization for a couple months or, your lifespan, any time spent with them benefits the organization as well as may benefit you as well too. So it's not something that you're locking yourself into for a lifetime. So if it is, an organization that you've done a little bit deeper dive on and you've gotten to know some folks within the organization and you start volunteering and start taking a role within this organization, you find out that it's not a right fit. It's okay to have that realization and then pivot and, maybe pursue a different organization or some other community involvement. But have you experienced that within kind of your time giving back or your involvement in the community where you joined an organization that wasn't a right fit and then you decide, hey, this isn't for me. I enjoyed giving my time or financial assets to this organization, but I'm going to go ahead and pivot and go in this direction instead?
Honestly, yes, that has happened where you've agreed to serve on a committee or a board, and perhaps the leadership has changed throughout your tenure. Mm-hmm. And their vision versus the vision that you saw the organization going might be different now. And that happens. And it's okay to have a conversation with yourself and have that talk about, is this still something that I want to spend my time? Because you are a volunteer and you are giving back your time, and we all know how precious our time is, and we only have so many hours in a day. So if it's not something that you believe in, the organization's also going to realize that. They're going to notice that you're not fully engaged, and they don't want you if you're not going to be engaged. So maybe there's another individual within your company, or you have a friend or someone you're mentoring that they might be better fit for that organization. And so I find that if you are going to roll off of a board or a committee or something that you've already said that you're going to commit to, then maybe find a replacement or talk to the leadership and tell them how you're feeling and figure out what the next appropriate step is and when the appropriate time for you to then roll off that commitment would be for you.
That's some great insight. And I think one thing that I maybe want to dive a little bit deeper on is that time commitment. And I know you're extremely involved within the community. And I think that sometimes we might get wrapped up into just becoming yes people, where we always say yes and it's hard to say no. How do you go about not spreading yourself too thin and making sure that, hey, I've decided I'm going to focus on maybe these 3 charities and that's it for the 2021 calendar year or whatever it may be? Do you have any sort of strategy or thoughts around making sure you don't spread yourself too thin when it comes to community involvement and giving back to charities or other organizations?
Yeah, I think you really need to sit down and you need to ask yourself, what are the things that I'm already committed to? How much more time am I supposed to spend with those organizations. A lot of these have 1, 2, 3 year type commitments. And so until you get off of a few different boards or committees, you really can't take on more. And so it's been a hard thing for me, myself to practice. I've had to start saying no to quite a few different organizations because coming out of COVID, I feel like I took on a whole bunch more that I was used to sitting at home and having more free time. And I don't think I realized how busy things would get once the world opened back up. But, you also have to leave yourself the window of opportunity so that when the right opportunity comes open and it's something that you really are passionate about, you can say yes. And so you have to give yourself permission to have at least, some extra space in your schedule so that you can take on those opportunities that are really exciting to you. And I'll probably talk a little bit about one of those that came up most recently for me here in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And we'll certainly get to that organization here soon. There's definitely a lot of benefits that charitable organizations or different community organizations may benefit from individuals like ourselves volunteering to those organizations. I want to reverse that a little bit and just ask you, what are some of the benefits or the things that you've enjoyed the most about being involved within your community and different charitable organizations?
Honestly, the thing that brings me the most joy and the most passion is working with the children. I've gone and I've read books to kids for Dr. Seuss Day at Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, things like that. And getting to see the kids, meet the kids, work with them, being involved with the Down Syndrome Guild and working with some of the Down Syndrome children and watching the joy that they get just from having a conversation with somebody that they think is fun and smart and out in the community. Those are the things that I really am passionate about, and just getting to know the individuals and the organizations that you're impacting. I think that's the best part of the volunteer project.
And some of the different things that I've seen, I know that I think that's some of the best parts that I've experienced giving back as well too. But I also see, within clients that we work with directly, that there's an ability to also involve the entire family. And kind of to your point earlier in the podcast where, some of these kind of giving back and charitably inclined values that you have instilled within you came from at a young age, right? That it wasn't necessarily something new. It's kind of something that you've always known. And I think that's one piece that I've been able to experience, as well as just kind of from a third party view with clients that we work with. They've been able to help instill these beliefs and values within their children by, teaching them or kind of giving them opportunities to give back within their community or volunteer with different charitable organizations as well.
Thanks again for downloading this episode of Your Life Simplified, which is produced by Mariner Wealth Advisors. And at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we're here to serve as your advocate. We help people chart a course to reach their personal and financial goals so that they can have greater peace of mind that may lead to a more fulfilling life. We do this by always putting our clients first. Because as fiduciaries, we're required to provide guidance that's in the best interest of clients, not in the best interest of a company or shareholders or anyone else. So as you listen to this podcast and have questions about maybe your own financial situation, or would simply like a second opinion, or even you have an idea for a future podcast, please go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you found the information on this podcast valuable, please go ahead and share it with a friend or family member that you think might benefit from this information. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and now back to the episode.
And that leads me kind of to one of our last questions that we had for you. But what are some ideas or organizations that you could share to our listeners who are looking to get involved within their community? I know you touched on it briefly, but if you're just sitting across from the table with me and I was like, hey, Katie, where should I start? What are some great organizations that you've enjoyed spending time with? And how can I kick off my journey to getting involved in my local community?
There are simple things you can do. I had a project that one of my children did a couple years ago. It was called How to Be a Good Neighbor. And we took the wagon in our garage and we went around the neighborhood and we went door to door on a nice fall afternoon and rang all the doorbells. Most people were probably watching a football game. And so they were home, and we took canned goods and we started collecting them. And my kids were so excited about this project. We filled that wagon up probably 3 or 4 times and brought it back to our house, would unload it, kept going around the neighborhood, getting those canned goods. And then loaded them all in the back of my car, took them to our local food shelter, and weighed the amount of food that we had collected. And we had, in one afternoon, produced 600 meals for homeless.
Really?
And that is just a simple project you can do just on a Sunday afternoon with you, your friends, whoever. I think doing things like that, I've also done lemonade stands. Our children have been involved in that, where you raise money and donate it to a charity. Typically, kids like to donate to animal shelters and things like that. That's usually where the funds tend to go. But it's just a fun thing that you can do in your local community that doesn't involve a lot of time. It's just usually a one afternoon type project.
That's a wonderful idea. I haven't thought of that before. And I think that, our listeners will definitely benefit from that idea. A few others that I just kind of had off the top of my head when researching and putting things together for this episode was just visiting simple websites or just Googling, right? Going to volunteer.gov. They have a lot of organizations that you can go through and filter out by location and other filters. And another one that I think may get overlooked at times is just contacting your local schools. They're always looking for volunteers and different individuals to help give back within the school district, as well as just like you mentioned earlier, Katie, touch base with different mentors or other individuals that are involved within your community. Hey, could I pick your brain or take you to coffee, or could we grab lunch real quick? I just want to chat with you about, getting involved within my local community. Another idea too for getting involved is reaching out to your employer, your HR group, and how does your employer think about giving back to the community, as well as just being involved within local charities or other organizations. I know here at Mariner, we have Mariner Foundation. Katie, you previously sat on the board of Mariner Foundation. Would you mind just diving in a little bit deeper on what Mariner Foundation is and how Mariner Wealth Advisors as a company views giving back to our local communities?
Mariner Foundation was started by our CEO's family, who wanted to have a way to honor employees' requests to give back to charities and match dollar for dollar whatever an employee was passionate about. And so it was created with a little tiny lump sum of money, and it has grown to be a very generous foundation with almost $1 million a year collecting in that foundation. And employees fill out their grant requests to the foundation. The foundation board will then review it and decide if that organization is one that they want to give out funds to. And they also decide how much they want to allocate towards a certain organization. So employees give to the foundation. It's matched dollar for dollar by our CEO and his family. And then employees get to make requests for the organizations that they're passionate about. They get to summarize why they think that organization is one that they think that the Mariner Foundation should give money to. And typically, those organizations will align with what the foundation's mission is. And our foundation tends to focus on children's charities in particular. It's a little broad, but at the core, it's focused on children's charities. And so if there's an organization that an employee of Mariner is passionate about, and they have a reason why they think that our foundation should give back to that organization, they can submit that grant request, and hopefully it will get approved, and then the funds will get allocated towards that nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. It's enjoyable too, from kind of an employee standpoint, where I'm not directly involved with the board or Mariner Foundation, but have been able to donate some funds to the foundation. And it's fun to watch just all the different organizations and local communities that the Mariner Foundation has an impact on. And I think it also, from top down kind of encourages fellow employees like myself to get involved within their communities, both locally and non-locally. So wonderful organization that Mariner has as well. So there's a lot of different ideas out there. Again, it could be a simple Google search or grabbing the kids with a wagon and putting together some meals for the local food bank. And Katie, as I mentioned earlier, I know you're involved in a lot of organizations, but there's one that you're currently involved in that's kind of near and dear to your heart. And would you mind just kind of diving into what your commitment with Make-A-Wish looks like, as well as just giving kind of a broader overview of Make-A-Wish?
Yeah, so I was asked to chair the Women of Wish, which is a new initiative here in the Kansas City area, where 10 women joined together, and we each are going to raise $10,000 during the month of February. Some people have started raising money a little bit early, but during the month of February, ideally, is the time frame where we're each going to raise $10,000. Make-A-Wish is an organization that supports kids with typically terminal diseases that are looking for that one last wish. And research has shown that children that are granted their wish, it changes their total outcome. And a lot of these kids, they end up actually surviving because they now have a renewed faith and the family is excited. And a typical wish costs $10,000. That's why we decided that each woman was going to raise $10,000. So, taking that family trip to Disney is finally going to be a reality for a lot of these kids. And especially now more than ever, after COVID, a lot of travel was shut down. So those kids weren't able to do the wishes that they were wanting to do, and that was on pause. So now we have over 600, I think maybe almost 700 children here in the greater Kansas City area that are needing their wishes to be fulfilled. And so the need is great. These kids, unfortunately, a lot of them have a terminal diagnosis, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what their outcome is going to be. And hopefully through granting these wishes, these kids will have a renewed faith on life, and they're going to have more optimism and be excited about the course that they're going to go through. And some of these wishes can be simple. One of the best stories I remember is the woman who started Make-A-Wish. Her son wanted to be a police officer for a day. And so they made that happen. They had him, sit in the police car and go around the local police station and do all the things that a police officer would do for a day. And that was his wish. And within, a week, his life was unfortunately over. But yet that mom has carried on that tradition, and she has started the Make-A-Wish chapter, and that is where everything was started.
That's wonderful. And it sounds like a great organization, and I'm wishing you the best of luck throughout your process of raising the $10,000. Sounds like you might be waiting to start till February, or are you getting a head start now?
I might be getting a little bit of a head start.
That's great. Well, for our listeners, where can they go to find out more about you or connect with you, or learn about kind of your journey through giving back or being involved in the community?
If anybody wants to connect with me, feel free to go to my personal LinkedIn page with Mariner Wealth Advisors and send me a message there. And I'd be happy to respond to you about how to get involved in the community or other ideas and tips that I might have.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Your Life Simplified. If you found the content of this episode beneficial, please like and share with any individuals that you think may benefit from this episode. If you have any questions, ideas, or other content suggestions, please reach out to podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Mariner Wealth Advisors, MWA, is an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Kansas. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which it is notice filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with the prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money. The views expressed in this podcast are for educational purposes only and do not take into account any individual personal, financial, legal, or tax considerations. As such, the information contained herein is not intended to be personal legal, investment, or tax advice. Nothing herein should be relied upon as such, and there is no guarantee that any claims made will come to pass. The opinions are based on information and sources of information deemed to be reliable, but Mariner Wealth Advisors does not warrant the accuracy of the information.